Welcome to everyone joining us this Friday afternoon. We thank you for being here for our The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. We're very excited to jump on the time machine today with none other than Don Carson. So stay tuned and we will get started right at 12. Welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Time travel is the ultimate immersive experience. Tech like AI, projection mapping, and drones frankly pale in comparison to the notion of sailing across the seas of time and space and reliving history, or exploring the world of tomorrow. Here in the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, imagination rules, and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists Ryan Harmon and Joanne Cicero study the past and spend the present envisioning the future of location-based entertainment, or what we like to call UX IRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. Each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set the controls for milestone moments in that person's career, an attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely, yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box and our passenger will answer them after the hour-long journey. Climbing aboard our time machine today for our 31st episode is one of the only designers and illustrators in our industry who effortlessly straddles the physical and digital realms, Don Carson. With an unequaled ability to infuse worlds of his imagination with humor and relevance, communicated through his speedy ink drawings and art direction, Don has created real-world projects like San Francisco's Dickens Fair, Mickey's Toontown, and Splash Mountain at Walt Disney World, along with digital worlds projects like Meow Wolf, Jules Verne, and the Spooky Widow's Walkabout VR courses for Walkabout Mini Golf. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer, Ryan Harmon, and Zeitgeist Executive Vice President and Chief Art Director, Joanne Cicero, along with the man who gave up the glamour of Hollywood for the forests of Oregon long before remote work was possible, Don Carson.
Hey, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody. Well, we just came back from 2003 because on this day in 2003 in Hong Kong, they broke ground for what would become Hong Kong Disney.
Yes,
and that
which you ruled for a number of years,
short time.
But our first guest, Tom Morris, was the initial creative director,
and he was there that day,
yes,
as well as a dear friend to all of us, one of the great Imagineers, John Verity, who sadly passed away this week.
Yeah.
But it was great to see him in his prime with his big smiling face, and we'll never forget John. So tip of the beanie to John.
Yes.
But anyway, we're here today
With Don.
with Don Carson. What a joy to have you, Don.
Yes.
And I want to start by, I'm going to use a quote from Marty Sklar that he used to describe Walt Disney. So I'm going to be so bold to say I think this also applies to Don Carson. And his quote was that Walt had one foot in the past and one foot in the future. And that foot in the past was understanding, those things that were timeless, that made, those human connections to the art and things that he created, but he always was forward looking. What is the next technology, the new thing that I can use and explore to make great things for people? And I think that so describes Don Carson. You were one of the first people I know, to start to embrace technology in a way. And I know you're going to talk quite a bit about that today. So I'm not going to stop rambling on. Let's set the controls on the machine here.
First time in 2024.
Yes.
We're going to go back to the mid 60s, maybe 64. We're here in Santa Ana, California, though we know you live up in San Francisco, and you're drawing, and it looks like you're about to go to Disneyland with your grandparents. Like, tell us what's going on here.
Well, I did grow up in San Francisco, and my grandparents were down in near Anaheim, and so we'd never visited them without a trip to Disneyland. So, although I don't remember when I was one what it was like to be at Disneyland, it was formative, and it was this amazing, magical place that I got to visit. And when I was home, I was drawing all the time, and often I was drawing to just sort of recapture my feelings about Disneyland. So, really, really early on, the hook was well in. And then I drew all the time. So my childhood was whenever, and I was super shy. So I spent a lot of time with pen and paper.
Now, were you drawing maps to kind of remember the lands?
Yeah, everything. I think even early on, you kind of own it, and you kind of get to re-experience it when you sketch it, which is why I love to sketch while traveling. Is that you get to really, really know something. And so drawing Disneyland at a little kid was getting to know it.
Wow.
Awesome.
So it's 1980, and you just
wait. Well,
what happened? Time machine back in 1977.
Yeah, let's go to when you're 14 and da 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 da. What impact did Star Wars have on you, Don?
Well, I think Star Wars for a lot of creative people was permission to think bigger than we had been. And I think even when anybody does a quiz and asks, what happened in a time frame, it's always whether it happened before Star Wars or after Star Wars. It was that formative. So I sort of switched gears and started drawing lots of Star Wars stuff. But really, I never lost that love of place drawing that I get from Disneyland.
That's a great comment that Star Wars made us think bigger.
Yeah.
I remember all of a sudden it kind of blew the walls out.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Something else I think Star Wars did was it was one of the very, very first films that did art of books. Where they actually showed you how things were made. And that was the fascinating part. Almost more interesting than movies sometimes is the process they went through to make it.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. You couldn't get the art of Pixar or the art of Disneyland, none of those things. Wow. So you graduated high school in 1980, and then you went to the Academy of Arts in San Francisco, and I guess you studied commercial
illustration.
Yeah, tell us about how much you loved that.
Well, I did. Really, it was you come of an age and you think what you're going to do for a living, and I like to draw. And what career would allow me to draw all the time? Really, the only one I knew about was illustration. The good news about illustration is it taught you to take those pictures in your head and communicate ideas visually on paper. And composition and value and all those important things, but storytelling through your imagery. And so I launched from college and immediately discovered that I wasn't cut out for commercial illustration. That really what I loved was the coming up with the painting, not the painting. And in fact, in my exit interview with the head of the illustration department, she asked, "What do you want to do with your degree?" And I said, "Is there a job where I can just do the roughs and not do the finishes?" And she said, "Absolutely not. That does not exist." And so I'm living proof that one can make a living doing nothing but roughs and never finishes.
Don, you do yourself a disfavor because every one of your drawings is a complete masterpiece,
absolutely.
even in its most crude form.
But it's always a rough.
So how did your portfolio look at this point? Was it unique or?
But no, the one disadvantage is when you leave college is that your portfolio looks exactly like everybody else who graduated at the same time, and to the point where they go, oh, you're an academy student or you're an art center student. And so I thought I should reinvent my my portfolio. And we had a teacher at the time who showed us his portfolio, and it was full of lots of pen and ink drawings of like ketchup bottles. And like back then, artwork was drawn for everything. So if you had coupons in your paper, some artist drew it, and this guy drew that. And he complained that the only work he ever gets is drawing ketchup bottles. And it was really obvious to me, do not put in your portfolio anything you don't want to do. And I had a portfolio full of commercial illustrations. So I thought, I'm going to do a portfolio of the things that interest me. What interests me? And so, well, Disneyland interests me. And so I decided to, I wasn't getting any work. I was working in an art supply store. I thought, I'll do a portfolio that has nothing but drawings of Disneyland in it and see if I can get a book published. And I called it Attention to Detail, a Disneyland Sketchbook. And it was basically a sketchbook of doorknobs and lamp posts and all that stuff that you don't think about. And ended up producing 150 watercolor drawings of obscure Disney stuff. Because I wasn't working, I had time on my hands. And I sent that to Disney. And the only person that I could look up in the yellow pages who I could send it to was Dick Nunes, who was the president of Disneyland at the time.
Wow.
You know, hi, you don't know who I am. I've done these illustrations. You should print a book of it. And amazingly,
you sent him all the drawings?
I know, I sent him copies. I created a whole presentation with really bad text and an introduction. And so amazing, like 2 weeks later, Dick Nunes called back and said, I'm the wrong guy, but I know the guy who this should go to, so I'm going to send it to Bo Boyd, who was the head of publishing at Disney, and off it went. And about 3 months later, I get this invitation to fly down to Burbank and visit the studios, I think, to get my book published.
Right.
Hey, okay.
And I show up and discover, no, they just wanted to look me in the eye because they just couldn't believe that anybody was so foolhardy as to do 150 watercolors and with no hope of ever having it published. And so I got a tour of the backlot when there was one, and the archive when it was in the basement, and I had lunch with Disney people, and I think I was 21 at the time. And I foolishly, in my 21-year-old brain, thinking I was an adult, had decided prior to going there that my dream was to get this book published, and I wasn't going to let anything get in the way of my dream. And I knew these corporate people are tricky, and they're going to try to convince me to not have my dream. And so I'm sitting around this table at the commissary with people I've been introduced to, and I can barely remember their names. And this guy sitting to my left says, I work at this place up the street, and we do stuff for Disney too, and I think your stuff would fit in really nicely. Do you have time after lunch? I'd love to drive you to Glendale, and we can visit you, and you can show your stuff to the people here. And I went, aha, here's an example of them trying to trick me out of my dream. So I said no.
Oh, ouch.
Who was that guy?
It was Orlando.
Orlando Ferrante.
Yes. And I turned down an invitation to show my portfolio at Imagineering, a WED at the time.
Wow.
And it took me 6 years to get in after that. I was knocking on the door for 6 years to get that invitation asked of me again.
Wow.
So yeah.
And what they say about publishing the book?
So so Bo Boyd said, you know, Abrams, who was our publisher at the time, if you were a Disney artist, then we would publish it. But since you aren't, they're just not interested. Wow. So, but he said, if you had been a Disney artist, we would have published it. And so fast forward, 8 years, as a Disney artist, I wrote him a letter in an inner office, envelope. And said, hey, remember what you said? I'm an Imagineer now. And he just sent me a note that just said, good for you. But the silver lining was when I finally did get interviewed at Imagineering, they asked me the question whether I was familiar with their product, and I dropped 150 watercolors at Disneyland on the desk, and they went, "Okay, I guess you know what we do here," and that was the ticket in.
I'm just curious, to create those 150 watercolors, did you go around the park and take photographs and then copy? Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is when there was film and not digital. And my wife and I took a trip down to Disneyland, and I think I took like 20 rolls of, and of course I was photographing the cobblestones and the doorknobs and the popcorn wagons.
Right.
What's interesting is, of those 150 things I drew, probably 75% of them no longer exist at Disneyland. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
all right. So we're in 1984. You're 21, and you suddenly are wearing like Renaissance clothes.
Yeah, my wife, I met my wife Nadia at the Academy of Art College, and both of us were in charge of booking models for the figure drawing classes. And so we were always looking for people who had costumes to come and pose. And so we would go to the Renaissance Fair in Nevada with a clipboard and just flag down, attractive clothing people and say, "Would you like to model for $20 an hour?" And we got hooked. We started as visitors, and then we worked in a food booth, and then we had a craft booth. And I met the head of the crafts department, and they had just lost their art director, and they said, "You draw, so would you be interested in being the art director for the Renaissance Fair?" So for years, I was the art director for Renaissance Pleasure Fair in Southern and Northern California. And in the wintertime, they did the Dickens Christmas Fair, so I art directed that as well.
Oh.
Right. And what were some of the design lessons you took away from that experience?
Well, my budget every fair was like $3,000, and so the goal was to recreate Elizabethan England with plywood and hay bales. So fast forward to Disney, where they're giving you $80 million. My default was, it doesn't matter, I can design anything with anything.
Right.
Wow.
Wow, that's super cool.
So 1989.
Yeah, you and I were already Imagineers for about 2 years.
Yeah, I'd just been there for a couple of years.
Yeah, and remember the Chase the Dragon? They gave us buttons, and apparently that's it has a double meaning. It means like shooting heroin or something. What? Yes, to chase the dragon. And that came out around that time, and everyone's like, "Oh, we're gonna chase the dragon." But this was
that was a big campaign.
Yeah, to bring people in. We got like $50 if you recommended somebody, and they got hired, which I did. Yeah, so tell us how you came into WDI.
So yeah, I was hoovered up with. It was a time period where if you held a pencil right, you were hired. It was They were filling the halls, and either whether it was a talent or it was probably my annoyingly knocking on the door so much, they in a weak moment they let me in, and so I started at the end of '89.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. Right. So you're first day there, you're sitting around the table with some other pretty famous, now famous Imagineers. Ben Tripp was there and others, and they were dealing out assignments.
Yeah.
And which card did you get, Don?
Yeah. So it was Kathy Kirk was our manager, and she was handing out our first projects, and I was the last in line. So they were handing out, just each one was better than the last. It was just like, oh my God, Dick Tracy, that'd be so cool to work on.
That was cool.
And they finally got to me, and they were like, "Oh, you're going to work on the third Splash Mountain." And I was like, "Oh." It's like, "Oh, okay." And the goal was that I was going to be on the project for a week and a half. And it turned into 2.5 years, because the changing of the width of the ride vehicle really eliminated room for sets. Basically, there's lots of room for flume and egresses, and not a lot of room for sets. So we ended up redesigning everything so that it would fit in this new configuration. And I worked with Kathy Mangum, who I owe a huge amount of gratitude, because I was as green, I was April green as far as going into this organization, handed an entire attraction. Luckily that no one else wanted to touch, because it was the third of something. Who wants to touch it? There's Indy to work on. Why would I work on this? And so I got to touch every part of it and learn everything about our business from just here's a building, here's a flume, here's Joe and Cicero's storyboards, make it fit in this building, and that was a great experience.
Well, now, why did they change the width of the boat? They didn't like the behind each other seating?
Yeah, they went to
Yeah.
side-by-side seating.
Oh,
Yeah, when you're about to sit on your aunt's lap, you
Yeah.
pause for like 90 seconds before you get in,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
capacity was lower. But if
yeah,
you're sitting next to your aunt, you're okay. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
dispatch was much faster.
okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And you had a young assistant rock carver on that project?
Yes, Terry Koo was an assistant rock carver.
An assistant rock carver,
Assistant
not even
un-
a rock carver.
Yeah,
assistant.
under yeah.
All you
under-
young people listening, we all start from small beginnings.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Yes, he worked under John Gald, and years later, actually not that long ago, I was in a meeting with Terry, and he said, "You remember me?" vividly remember you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. So you're 29. It's 1992. Splash Mountain opens, and you guys start working together. Tell us what
Well,
that was like.
actually, backing up,
Oh,
we were doing Splash Mountain simultaneously. Don
oh,
was doing Florida, and I was doing Tokyo.
Okay.
So we would, and many of the figures, because
Yeah,
Tony
yeah.
Baxter had taken all the figures
Out of
from
American
the
Scenes.
American Scene, so we
Right.
had to build ours anew.
Isn't that ironic?
I know. And so that's when I first got to meet Don and started to see his incredible artwork. Oh my God, this guy can draw, amazing. And he was just a sweet human being,
Yeah.
just as he still is. And so that's where we kind of got hooked up
Okay.
there. And then I got this juicy assignment to do Toontown.
Yeah.
And kind of like with Splash Mountain, doing the third mountain, no one really was cared that much
Really?
about what we were doing,
First time a Mickey Mouse.
because they
land?
were finishing the studio, they were building Paris.
Right.
There's all these big mega projects, and then there's a little project over there in Anaheim.
Wow.
It was great. They left us alone.
You guys, is it true you had 23 months to
Mhm.
pull this off?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, and it was during the downtime between concept and production for Splash for both of us. So we had
Right.
this
Yeah.
sort of time where we were going to Tahunga to
Yeah.
look at figures, or we were sitting at our desk, and so Toontown slipped in perfectly to that void in our schedule.
Wow. So how did you-
And Don's drawing style was perfect. 'Cause
Yes.
we were trying to figure out how to the vocabulary, the design vocabulary for a cartoon world.
right.
Because we couldn't use the 2D backgrounds from the films because they weren't immersive enough, because
Right.
the films were always about the characters.
Mm.
And so we soon discovered that we had to give the buildings the character that the characters had.
Right.
And always, and Don's great storytelling, and I'm sure Becky's going to show some of the pictures, was always something had happened. There was something
Oh, right,
alive
right.
about everything that you drew, all the gags that you came up
Right.
with. And really, I a debt of gratitude, Don, because you really set kind of the tone, the look, and the feel for that land.
Wow.
Well, a lot of it too, I think initially we were like, this is going to be a piece of cake. We're just going to watch those old movies and we're just going to reproduce the houses that the characters lived in. And then we realized that the only thing goofy about Goofy's house was that Goofy lived in it, that his
Yeah.
house kind of looked like a bungalow in Pasadena. And then we thought, that's no problem. We'll just go to Roger Rabbit and we'll just recreate the Toontown in Roger Rabbit.
Oh, right.
But the Roger Rabbit Toontown, humans die, and
Yeah, it was a dark, nasty place.
super dark. And then all of these houses had googly eyes and like, and they would hover over you, and they were all kind of gelatinous, and they would move. Just an absolute nightmare, fuel for a toddler. And so we thought, how can we can't just do bungalows, and we can't do scary, buildings with teeth. How do we come up with a design principle that would make them cuddly and friendly without being terrifying? And so we came up with Toon physics, which was that if all the buildings are pliable, the analogy we used was like, if you took 2 milk cartons and you filled one with air, it would expand and take up this part of the space the other milk carton was in, but it wouldn't cease looking like a milk carton. It'd be a
Right.
fat milk carton.
Oh,
So all the
right.
buildings have this kind of, the chubby guy next to the skinny
Yeah.
guy kind of,
Right.
of what we hoped was charm.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and we also had meetings with we had quite a large team to pull it off. And I remember the day we brought in the first carved building in the model. And we were really, the genesis of the project was that Mickey's Birthday Land was in Florida, which
Yeah.
did a lot of flats. The buildings were
Right.
flats. And so I think there was a percentage of the team that were like, that's easy, we'll do flats. And then we show up with this model of the, concrete fat buildings with lots of dimension. And there was kind of a, oh shit moment where we knew we had to do this because this was the obvious thing, but boy, no one had ever done something like that before.
Oh.
Yeah.
So how'd you
And-
get these traditional construction guys to know how to do all these curves and all that?
Well, we tried. Well, the model was incredibly invaluable, as always, the show model is. And we did our best in the drawing package to represent that. But compound curves that move at you in 2D drawings just don't communicate. And so we ended up slicing up the model and having a minder who was responsible for carrying the model into the field. And we just said to the contractor, make it look like that. Which they were thrilled by. Oh, great.
Yeah.
We'll just bend everything. But there was a lot of like pre-created windows and stuff that would show up, and we would discover that the walls had pinched more than they did in the architectural package. And so some windows went back on the truck, never to be attached because there just wasn't room for them.
Oh, wow. Interesting. I'm sorry, were you
Well,
saying?
no, and ironically, Don, if you recall, this was going to be the first project to use CAD.
Oh, right.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, they were gonna break CAD into us. They had just wrestled drawing tables away from veteran artists and
Lord.
draft artists,
Right.
and we're forcing them to use CAD, which was especially then not friendly with curves.
Yeah.
So we undecided to use CAD for our project.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Okay.
So 1993, we're all there at grand opening, so proud of what we did. And then you start working on another project, interesting project. I never touched it, but I thought it had huge potential, and that was Disney's America.
Yeah. It looks so
Yes.
cool. And
Yes,
so needed.
worked with the Kirk brothers on Disney's America, which was wonderful. It was Project V. We had a secret building. We weren't allowed to talk to anybody about it. Drove Ben Tripp nuts because Marcelo and I were both on it and we couldn't talk to him about it. So it became, we weren't supposed to do drawings and gags in the inner office letters because that's business, but that did not stop us from sending dozens and dozens of teasing cartoons back and forth as to the origins and the meaning of V, which was the code name for
We can only imagine.
yes.
Wow.
Wow.
That's great. So
Yeah.
what was that project like? And how far did you go on that?
It was great. Well, right up into the press announcement for it when
Oh, really? Wow.
when I think a lot of newspaper editors who had like summer houses near the site had vetoed it. It was great. I think it would be a very different place today because the kind of stories we tell about ourselves as a nation are very different. And but like all projects there, it was a blast to work on.
Wow. That's
Wow.
so cool. So 1995, your career at Disney, 8 years, comes to a close. Why?
Yeah, well, a combination of things. One is my wife Nadia never cared for living in Los Angeles, and our son was born. And another thing that had happened about that time is a game called Myst had come out. And I was playing this game on Myst, and I couldn't help but see, wait a minute, this looks a lot like the kind of stuff that we do for the theme parks. The opportunities are there. Also, there was a game that came out called Doom, which had you running around shooting, aliens and blowing their heads off and stuff. And I thought if you could combine the sort of visual fidelity of something like Myst with the free roaming quality of a game, like a 3D shooter, couldn't we possibly pre-imagine our attractions before the expense of going and pouring it in concrete? Because we've all had that oh darn moment when we have a hard hat on and we go, and that tree really would be better 2 meters to the right. And that's a $1 million change. If you could figure that out digitally.
Right.
And so we were also at Imagineering at a time period where there was a slump, as always, the hills and valleys for his productivity. And there were a lot of people not doing anything. So there was an effort to like, hey, go out and come up with new ideas of other projects Imagineering could do. And so I worked with a small team on a Haunted Mansion CD-ROM click adventure that would add depth to the story without changing the architecture of the building. And was met with just complete, like, absolute half-lidded eyed, like, boredom. Just like, we don't understand, that's weird. So the combination of the, like, well, let's not live in Los Angeles anymore. The theme park company saying, if you leave Los Angeles, you'll never work in this industry again, kid. And this interest in this Myst game, I thought, well, maybe I can take these skills, these illustration skills and these world building skills, and apply them to games. And so I was hired by Dynamics up here in Eugene, Oregon. And within a year, all those theme park companies said, no, it's okay, you don't live here. We'll use you.
We'll use you anyway.
We'll use you. So I quit the gaming industry and would freelance doing lots and lots. In fact, I think I've produced much more concept work since I left Disney than when I did when I was there. But I'd also opened the door to the gaming world, and also had understood the idiosyncrasies and the limitations of that medium as well. So I also would take on gaming projects at the same time. So hybrid career, just so I could pay the bills, was a combination of theme parks and video games.
Wow.
So 2000, you wrote, which is kind of now a pretty seminal paper about design in the gaming industry and how it related to the theme parks. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was frustrated that the theme park business was so not interested in the potential of the game engines in the game industry, but the game industry was equally uninterested in the design principles of the theme park world. And so out of frustration, I wrote this article on an online gaming website called Gamasutra, which catered to game design. And I basically said, look, there's an opportunity for us all to understand each other and benefit from these core design principles, which any Imagineer would yawn at the list. It's like really, really super obvious, good show, storytelling, visual, staging, all that stuff. And little did I know there was a hunger for someone to say it. And I was hired by a guy named Will Harvey, who was starting an online chat theme park, basically, called there.com. And the idea was way ahead of its time. You would have an avatar and you would show up on this digital island, and you could meet and chat and hang out with and do things with people no matter where they were on the planet. So it was a visual 3D avatar filled resort, which failed. But it led to more work doing that kind of stuff. And although it seems like the game design stuff is a departure from the theme park stuff, I personally have never thought of it as anything different. I've always approached everything like an attraction, basically. And whether I was asked to design a menu for a game or an entire game, it was always an opportunity to create a place you could go and experience it, and use things like good storytelling and vignettes and cause and effect and design to pull you through the experience and not necessarily attached to a ride track.
Right. Wow, that's pretty cool. So you were there 4 years, which takes us all the way to 2006 now. And there.com failed, and now you're at a place called IMVU.
Same founder. Well, the lessons he learned creating a virtual resort was just to take the avatar part and then create themed environments where you could hang out. And amazingly, IMVU still exists. It's out there. It's a little Barbie dress up for an avatar, and makes its money off of its vast catalog of ways you can dress up your avatar. But once again, it taught me I had to use all the tools of game design to build these virtual places, and learned a lot and made really good friends. And it also taught me that selfishly, I as a designer you want your design to look kind of like what you designed when it's done. And
Sure.
the best way for that to be true is to communicate as much as possible in the drawings or the imagery so that the person building it understands what your intent was. And so I found that some people don't, there's ways in which the 2D drawing can lie about things like scale or buildability or cost. And
Sure.
if I built a 3D model and I did a drawing of it, I could give the engineers and the architects the model, and I could give the creative team the drawing, and there was a better chance. So anytime a new tool came out, I would kind of hoover it up and try it out. And I got rid of lots of the stuff. It just wasn't going to work for me, but it built up this sort of resilience and a fearlessness when it came to scary new tools. And so to this day, I'm always the first to jump on something to see if I can fold it into my work progress and flow.
That's that foot in the future.
Yeah. So during this time, you were also doing theme park work on the side, right? Because
right, every weekend, full-time
Yeah.
job every weekend of working on the theme park business.
Yeah.
And then in 2013, Phil Hedema, I was doing some freelance for him, and he went, would you be interested in coming on board? And I said, only if you're brave enough to not let me live in Southern California. And he took the risk, and for 7.5 years, I worked for the Hedema Group.
Wow.
Joyful years of working with the best people on the planet, working on projects that did and didn't get built, but it wasn't important as important as I learned working with people you love to work with.
Yeah. You told us like the 4 things you learned about that. Why don't you share that with our audience?
Yeah, I think when you're young, you think the goal is to work at the prestigious place. So that's it. I'm going to work at Disney and it's going to be great. And then you get to Disney and you're like, this is great. But really, it's what you get to work on. What's the prestigious project you get to work on? That's really where happiness happens. And then I realized, no, it isn't necessarily where you work or what you get to work with. It's really who you get to work with. What are it's almost not important what the thing is. If you get to work with people you love working with, then every day is a joy. And I think that the final sort of level I've just recently sort of fallen into is that all those things are interesting and important, but you actually have to enjoy the process of doing it. That actually the joy comes from just the act of the ink coming out of the pen onto the paper. It's better when you get to work with people that you just love working with. But the joy of putting it down, and it has to be even more than the whether it gets built or not. That I have such fond memories of working with the Hedema Group for 3 years on a DreamWorks park that just because of reasons didn't end up happening. But that doesn't discount the joy of the time I spent doing good work.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was a little spoiled at Disney that so much of what we designed got built. And post Disney, I think the reality in the world is a lot more stuff gets designed than gets built. And so you learn the joys in the process. And every time something comes up and that Ryan and I are working on, I go, let's call Don, and mostly because it's just the fun of working with you and the joy, and you always over-deliver, always have over-deliver. Like you said early on when we were talking about just the drawing itself, and the process of communicating through the drawing. I hope that never gets lost. And that's what I love about you, even though you're embracing all these great technologies, it still comes back to the germ of the idea and communicating that idea and putting spirit and love into that idea. And then whatever method you use down the line to communicate it, in some other form, but it has to start at that love of that drawing.
Part of that was a necessity out of being a freelancer and working remotely in the mid-90s, was that often you weren't invited to the meeting where they misrepresented your art. Like, here's some drawings Don did of a restaurant. It's not a restaurant, it's a ride. You were so I realized that that over delivering was I really needed to make sure that the work spoke for itself. It pitched itself, and sometimes that meant like, here's an obvious drawing of a thing, and here's where I've written on the side of it.
Yeah.
describing the obvious thing with arrows pointing at it.
Right,
Yeah,
Because
you do
sometimes
a lot.
it's not obvious and you're not there to defend it. And
Right.
and that's worked out for me. It's all for selfish reasons. It's just so it would be super nice to be have the thing look like the design, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So 2014, you come back to the Dickens Fair. Tell us about that.
Well, it had been, 30 some odd years since we left. And and we would go as visitors, and we thought, I kind of miss having a booth. and mostly what we missed was the people. We had made such fast friends 30 years earlier, and here we are getting older. And so we decided just to try having a booth. And the booth we built is mostly Nadia's work. She's an oil painter and a porcelain sculptor. And so I'd tag along as support, often design the booth, and I would always include some work that we would. And so we did it from like 2015 to 2018 and went, we're done. We're never doing it again. And then COVID happened and we're like, I miss having a booth at the Dickens Fair. And so the last 2 years we've been back again, and we spent 5 weeks in San Francisco each fall.
Wow.
Stuff funny, doing our worst California Cockney, and selling stuff, and more than anything, getting to visit with this vast number of friends. And like Tony Baxter comes every year, and we chat shop, and there's just a lot of people from our industry show up there, and we get to visit.
And for those who don't know, can you tell us where it is and when it is?
Yeah, it's in San Francisco. For the last 20 years, it's been in the Cow Palace, which is this huge facility. It's got 5 stages, like over 1,800 performers, craftspeople, food, and the entire thing is Dickens novels performed sequentially throughout the entire day, live throughout the event. So you might see Scrooge being led through the street by the Ghost of Christmas Present, or you might see Nancy being chased by Bill Sikes, or it's a theatrical food art show that has shows, and it's kind of unlike, it's like the Renaissance Fair, which kind of doesn't exist anymore in the form that it was in Agora. So we do it, and we always get a head cold every time we do it. It's still more fun than it is a pain.
Yeah. So 2019 comes around, and early 2020, and as we all know, the world shuts down.
That's
what
right.
did Don Carson do?
Yeah, well, I always had this kind of fear that my creativity was rooted to somebody asking me to do work. And so, like, if they're not calling me to ask me to draw something, maybe I can't draw. And here, all of a sudden, I'm in a world where nobody's calling. And I have a really obscure blog where I write about very obscure design principles for theme parks. And I'd always wanted to chronicle the process of designing a dark ride. And although I probably participated in hundreds of dark rides, I can't show anybody any of them because I've signed a big old NDA that says I'm not allowed to say I worked on it. And so I thought, I'll just design a dark ride over the 2 weeks of COVID. And then the phone will ring. And so it started out as drawings, and then it was a foam core model, and then it was a digital model, and then it was a color digital model. And then a friend, Colin Vance, had a soundtrack and animations. I taught myself enough Unity to get a 3D VR camera through it. And so was born Pumpkin Town, which is kind of it's a Small World meets a haunted carnival ride where everybody's got a pumpkin for a head, and all the buildings are pumpkins, and they eat pumpkin pie, which is just, don't go there. So
I don't want to go there.
And so I documented the process of designing it and put it all on the web. And there's actually a VR version on YouTube. You can actually sit in the vehicle and look around and look at the back, ride it backwards if you want. And it proved that no, I can pretty much keep myself creatively busy even if the phone isn't ringing. And right after finishing it and posting it, Daniel Singer, who we worked with on many projects at Disney, is a huge Alice in Wonderland fan, and he just said, I wish someone would recreate the 1958 version of Alice in Wonderland from Disneyland. And I said, well, I'm not doing anything. So we started it, and it really became obvious that it was a bigger job than just the two of us could do. And so I reached out to Heidi Hirsch and Karen Thompson and said, "You're not doing anything. Would you be interested in working on recreating Alice in Wonderland for Disneyland?" And so we spent 2 wonderful months producing this ride, sort of a archaeological dig version of this attraction as it existed in 1958. And Karen and Heidi, we doled out each scene, who got to do the color work on it. And what was great was this is the sort of burgeoning of VR as a tool for people to meet in. And so although this was sort of the end of it, we realized we had the ability of having walkthroughs while it was being constructed, no matter the fact that we were living in different states. As long as you had a VR headset, we could jump in the project. And so you can walk it and explore it. And once again, we did a video and a VR ride through of it. And it was a wonderful passion project. And what I'd hoped it would do was it would at least suggest that this is actually something that's doable, that being able to recreate attractions or come up with your own attractions is not a replacement for a theme park experience, but it is another outlet for the creative energies of people who love theme park rides to be able to design things for this medium.
Well, and for the fans of those experiences to enjoy them and experience them without a $150 ticket or flight or any of those things.
Or even I did spend the $150. I went to it, but I'm hungry for the Haunted Mansion. I wonder what's behind that door, to be able to go to a digital version and discover and love those products even more.
Right. Wow. So 2021 comes around, and I don't know if you loved golf in your youth, but now you
do now.
Tell us about VR mini golf.
Well, Heidi and Karen and I, we would meet in VR and visit. And there was this game called Walkabout Mini Golf, and that was our favorite one to meet in. And they came out with a Western themed course called Bogey's Bonanza. And all along we were saying, this is a lot like what we do for our day job, is these environments. Despite the fact we're playing miniature golf in them, the theming and the storytelling was really rich. And I finally went, damn it, I'm going to write them a fan letter. So I wrote them this gushing fan letter about, you go, keep going, you guys are doing it. And at the end of, I had a meeting with them, and they said, "Are you available?" And of course, COVID, I was so available. And so I started as their senior art director in September of 2021. And so I've been there for 2+ years and having the complete time of my life. Basically, I'm building theme park attractions that happen to have miniature golf in them. And we produce a new one every 6 weeks. So it's like opening a new attraction every 6 weeks. And the pictures can't do it justice. You have to be there. And for the cost of a $300 headset and a $14, miniature golf game, you can meet anyone in the world, any one of your friends who has a headset, and hang out in these places. So we design these places with that in mind. It's meant to be consumed and experienced like an attraction, except you get to wander around. And the track that pulls you from one place to the next is that you have 18 holes of golf. So each hole is another potential chapter for us to be able to tell our story.
And you have to actually stand up and swing your arms like you're golfing?
Swing your arms and golf, and you see each other as avatars. And I couldn't be prouder of the quality of the work. And now, granted, we run on all VR headsets, including the Quest, which is basically the power of a phone. So we have to go with low poly, which is like working with Legos. You have to do, everything has to be very stylized and simplified. And we've worked really hard for that not only not to be a problem, but actually has become our aesthetic.
Yes. As I was going to say, you've turned it, what could be looked at as a liability into an asset.
Wow.
And so much of this is about the moods that you create with the color and the lighting. It's just amazing.
Tony Thompson, who worked for DreamWorks, is our our lighting designer, and it's just magical what he's able to do with these environments. And the other thing worth noting is that the tools we use to build these VR places are also VR tools. So we actually meet on site throughout the entire process and art direct while standing inside the environments from its roughest possible state to the finished product.
Wow, Heidi just said this is our future. It really is. That's amazing. And now, ironically, companies like Imagineering finally did embrace your vision way back when, and they do their attractions in VR and all that sort of thing. So it's really cool, Don. And what are some of the courses you've done? I know Meow Wolf.
Yeah, we just released Meow Wolf, which was a fantastic collaboration. Unlike other IPs we've used where we basically ask permission to use them, we wanted to collaborate. We wanted to design it together. I got to work with Katie Kennedy, one of the founding artists and the lead designer for Numina, which is an exhibit in their Denver exhibit. And we created Numina in the digital world. Next Thursday, we're coming out with Around the World in 80 Days, our third Jules Verne course. And it takes place in 1890 if the top of the Eiffel Tower was a depot for airships to.
Which it was supposed to be, I think.
So actually, but these are like galleons attached to balloons and things. I mean, it's full on fantasy.
Wow.
Really great.
Obvious why you said you're having the time of your life. It's like all these cool things you get to draw.
And I'm drawing more than I ever was before, because although you'd think, oh, he's doing digital stuff, he never touches the pencil. I pretty much draw every prop in every environment prior to building it. It's as a way to get to understand it and also to try to calculate how I'm going to build it. And the other thing too is that I don't have an NDA for Mighty Coconut. As long as we've opened a course, I'm free to share everything. So I overshare a lot.
And Don, I love when you drop your preliminary drawings into LinkedIn and look at, oh God, look at that.
Well, it's super fun. And it goes back to that love the process. I get to do this. It's not that when my story was that Nadia and I have a favorite coffee place, and one Sunday we're in our favorite coffee place, and I'm drawing a bathysphere, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm drawing a bathysphere," and she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, it's for work." She said, "But it's Sunday. You shouldn't be doing work things on Sunday." And it's like, no, but I get to draw a bathysphere. And so it's just getting to work with these IPs, getting to work with the Henson people, getting to work with the Meow Wolf, but then also someone saying, do you want to design a haunted house? Yeah. Do you want to do all the 3 of Jules Verne's worlds as themed environments? Sign me up. Yes. And it's the company's 30 people, and every single thing I hand to the next person is better. And when the thing opens, all of us are just gobsmacked by the choices other people have made to make this one collective thing as good as it has been. So I feel really lucky.
Well, let's talk about some of the projects people don't necessarily know you worked on. We know one of your favorite projects of all time is the Miyazaki theme park.
Yeah, we're often asked to work on projects that don't have any chance of ever getting done, but we don't care. I've worked on many projects like that, and one of them was a hey, would you work on a Miyazaki bird's eye? And it a highlight. It was just being able to distill in my mind, at the very least, his films into a place.
Wow. And
that floated around for years. It may still be floating around, but it's being given the opportunity, whether it's that or it's Harry Potter or it's Avatar or whatever it is. Often you're the guy brought in at the beginning before anybody really knows what it is. And many times it gets swept away, and I have to wait 2 years to find out what did it become. And there'll be little glimmers of the things you worked on, and maybe not at all. But being asked to dream up the first image of what something might be is an honor.
Right. And what'd you do for Wizarding World of Harry Potter?
Well, I got to actually work with Tony early on when Disney was contemplating it, and Tony and Dave Durham and I were huge Harry Potter geeks, so it was just like a gleeful. It's gotta have Dementors. It's gotta have this. It's gotta have house elves. It's gotta have. And so I did some initial sketches, and then it ended up going to Universal, and which did just a breathtaking job of producing it. And I got to come in as a freelancer and do little bits of details for Hogsmeade. But all in all, it's just been a wonderful just to watch from the sidelines, and then finally as a guest get to go to those places that really, really lovingly recreated at least my imagination's idea of what those worlds were like.
Do you have a favorite park or attraction out in the world?
Oh my goodness me. Lots of them that I didn't work on. I love the Winnie the Pooh
that's what
ride in Tokyo. They just, I mean, it's in many ways, like it took me 10 years before I could go to Toontown. We'd go to Disneyland, and I'd say, "You want to go to Toontown?" No.
No. I understand completely.
No, because you can see the cuts, you can see the things. I have discovered, and Joe, I'm sure you have as well, is that nobody wants to know what you didn't like about it because it's canon. It's Toontown is, people who it didn't never not exist. It's like Venice. We weren't here before Venice to complain about how much nicer the marshes were before it showed up. And so I just, I can now go back and not complain about the fact that hinges, the themed hinges never made it on the buildings.
Wow. And there was another interesting project I believe didn't get built, but you got to work with the Henson Group.
Yeah, the wonderful world of stuff. What is that?
we got brought in. It was with Bob Weiss and Robin Reardon. We got to go to New York and hang with the Henson folks post Jim's passing, and explore various ways in which they could expand their brand. And the concept we came up with was at the time its title was Jim Henson's Wonderful World of Stuff, which was this sort of mini indoor theme park meets department store meets food court meets kids play area, where the dessert tray would come by after dinner and all the dessert would sing to you and things like just wonderful fun stuff, which was great. And that was what's great, after 40 years of doing this, is when the phone calls comes in, would you like to work on this? Well, yeah, I'd love to work on that. But it doesn't always happen.
Yeah. The one that excites me is when you guys work together and you chained the chair to the Peter Pan ride at Disneyland. Flying through there on what is this? Magic carpet.
Yeah, it's under the guise of research. We can sometimes talk people to put teacups on the Haunted Mansion or suspend chairlifts from Peter Pan just so we can see if it will work or not. But yeah, Joe and I have had a wonderful opportunity to work on various projects, some that happened and some that didn't, that involved in the field work.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So we like to talk about your philosophies, things you've learned, and the advice you would give people starting out these days. I don't know how you want to approach.
Well, certainly those 4 principles. I wish I could go back in time and hey, you have a time machine. I wish I could go back in time into 1983, and this can tell it's really, really about the process. That's the fun part. And also to just give yourself a break. The world and the universe has plans for you that absolutely are not connected to what you think you want to do when you grow up. And you may find yourselves in a career or doing something you go, really? Does this define me? Is this really what I'll be doing? But then when that opportunity arises, you realize you could not do today's thing without the lifetime of experiences, good or bad, that led you to it. The tools I learned doing dress up avatars utterly allow me to do the work that I do for Walkabout. At the time, I didn't know that, but my ability to be a creative creature is fueled by the good and the bad stuff the fun and the less fun stuff I got to work on.
Yeah.
So with all this vast experience
And wisdom.
we got to ask the seminal question here: what
Yes.
makes an experience
Timely.
yet
yet
timeless?
Well, it's a hard question. My answer would be that the timely is not to be afraid with the tools that are offered to you, even the new tools that come along. Our audience is constantly changing. You know, a bunch of old white guys getting into a room and thinking about what an audience wants is not necessarily what the audience wants.
Right.
There'd still be an Anderson's pea soup if it was up to us. But it's not being afraid to reach out to those new technologies. But the timeless part is that a good story told and a good theatrical experience, there's reasons we use the tools we do and the ways in which we go about it. We want everything that we design to be timeless, and they tend to be the most when we remember our roots in good storytelling, but aren't afraid to use the modern day tools to do it in, but never let those modern day tools dictate or change that good heartfelt story we're trying to make. And in the end, you can make anything out of plywood and hay bales.
There you go. And with that, thank you,
Yes,
Don.
Don.
Wow,
That was
what a great
amazing.
journey this was today.
Thank you.
Super cool.
Fantastic. Well,
Well-
yeah, I think we should take the time machine back just a couple weeks because I didn't get to go to the Dickens Fair. So,
Oh,
Don, we're off to the
yeah, let's
Dickens
go
Fair.
check it out.
We'll see you there.
See you
2
there.
weeks ago.
Stick
Okay.
around, Don. Don't go anywhere. And
Okay.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And,
Wishing you all the best in the year of the dragon.
We'll see you in another place and time. All right. Take
Bye,
care.
guys.
Bye.
Okay, everybody. That was fun. Okay. Oh my goodness, there we are. So we hope you enjoyed the ride. Thank you so much to our friend Don Carson for time traveling with us today. If you have questions for Don, stick around for our live Q&A in just 60 seconds. On behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending an hour of your time with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out all 31 of our time travel adventures on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. They're also available as podcasts wherever you listen. Open your diary and plan now to join us on Friday, February 16th, when our passenger will be one of the most talented and prolific writers behind some of Disney and Universal's most beloved attractions, including extraterrestrial alien encounter, Mike West. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
La 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 la. Get it.